Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Adeshewa Adesiji, and I'm a workforce strategy consultant with the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I am so excited about the discussion we'll be having today. So this is one of the many roundtable discussions held during DEED's Technology Workforce Month. Today's discussion is going to be around BIPOC representation in the tech industry, both as working tech professional and as an entrepreneur in this space. We invited a group of experienced, very knowledgeable tech entrepreneurs to talk about their experiences and also to provide insight and advice for those wanting to enter the field and or are interested in becoming entrepreneurs in this space. So as a reminder, all audience members will be muted during the discussion. If you have a question, put it in the comment section. We'll be checking that as the panel discussion is going on, and then any questions that we see that aligns with the current discussion going on, we'll ask that question to the panelists. So as we all know, the tech industry is largely white and male dominated. So according to the most recent DEED LMI data, information technology counts for about 3.8% of the total employment in Minnesota. The national average for such occupations is about 3.4%. So that means that, information technology work is more concentrated in Minnesota than, in the nation. Because of the high demand of information technology workers, wages for workers in these occupations are usually higher than for most occupations in Minnesota. However, when looking at professional, scientific, and technical services, which is the major industry sector with the highest concentration of tech jobs, as of 2020, so we're not fully, as of 2020, 87% of the workers identified themselves as white. When you break it down further and look at computer systems design, which is considered a more in-depth industry within the professional, scientific, and technical services, as of 2020, 77% identified as white. So definitely, heavily, white, and as I mentioned, male-dominated industry. And so when we look at between 2018 and 2038, the face of Minnesota will be changing as, populations within the BIPOC communities are expected to increase rapidly, not only within the metro area, but within pockets outside of the metro area. So these are going to be individuals that will be entering the workforce. And so the workforce is going to look a little different. So we can't have a changing workforce, a diverse workforce, but then have an industry that is still just white male identified. So with that, let me go ahead and pass this along and introduce Anissa Hajimunin. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. She is DEED's Assistant Commissioner of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, who will give some brief remarks and help set up the stage for today's discussion. So Anissa, take it away.
Thank you so much, Adeshewa, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you here today's conversation. Like Adeshewa said, my name is Anissa Hajimunin, Assistant Commissioner for Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. And just before I begin my thoughts and remarks on this conversation we're having today, I'd like to acknowledge the current events affecting the current climate in Minnesota and throughout the country. Because it's, the closing of arguments of Derek Chauvin's trial and, Dante Wright, killing in Brooklyn Center. And I hope each of you is finding this space to breathe and express your feelings and thoughts. And of course, like, Vice President Kamala Harris said yesterday, this is not something that's affecting either Blacks or people of color. It's affecting everybody. We're all affected by it. And with justice, we all need to work together, to come together to create the justice that everyone deserves, especially for Black folks and particularly Black men. I'm just grateful that I'm in this position to really advocate for BIPOC communities and immigrants and refugees, that many of them, when they come to this country, do not really understand the dynamics and historical background of this country and, how to navigate the system. And with that, with April's Technology Workforce Month in Minnesota, it's really very important topic and something I'm always interested in seeing how BIPOC communities are taking advantage of the jobs available. Governor Walz proclaimed the month to focus on Minnesota's IT industry, and the number of tech-related jobs in Minnesota will be growing faster than other occupations in the next decade or so. And technology skills are needed at many levels across many industries. And these include manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, transportation, construction, and retail, to name few. And some of the data that will be growing in between 2000, that have been growing and continue to grow until 2038 and beyond. BIPOC communities will grow, and not only in the metro, but statewide. And some of these data include Black or African American, non-Hispanic will be 74.5%, American Indian or Alaska Native and non-Hispanic. There will be additional 13.3%. Asian or other Pacific Islander and non-Hispanics will be 69.3%. Two or more races that are not Hispanic will be 58.5%, while Hispanic of any race will be 48.8% in addition. And then whites are expected to decrease by 1.6%. And of course, while the importance of their roles had been highlighted during the pandemic, information technology workers have been in demand in the marketplace for a long time and will continue to be in the future. And it's necessary we encourage young Minnesotans, especially from BIPOC communities, to explore careers in information technology, whether it is supporting them, with, handling and finding solution to the challenge that they face, be it discrimination, be it other systematic challenges, or even hiring, recruiting, and getting promoted. And I hope that we can all come together to work together and collaborate and find ways to include our BIPOC communities and address the challenge that we'll be facing in the tech industry years to come. So the sooner we prepare, the better. And with that, Adeshewa, I'm handing it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. So now I would like to introduce our wonderful moderator, Jay Denson. So Jay Denson is the Vice President of Programming and Member Experience for Minnesota Technology Association, MinTech for short. So I will hand the reins to Jade and let her do her magic.
Awesome. Well, I am so honored to facilitate this panel. As someone who leads programming at a technology association, I'm sure you can imagine I've done a ton of panels since this pandemic has started, but today is the first for me to be joined by 3 Black presidents and CEOs in our tech ecosystem. My heart is smiling, my actual mouth is smiling too. So I'm excited to have a conversation today that will hopefully encourage more panels full of BIPOC senior technology leaders happening in our Minnesota community. So we have some heavy hitters on this call today, so I want to dive right in right away. Panelists, if you can give a brief introduction before we dive into questions and share your name, company, role, and what you love about being Black in technology. So we'll start with Aaron, then go to Caroline, and then last but not least, we'll have Jonathan share his insights, and then we'll dive into some questions. So Aaron, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Horn McKinney. So I wear a few different hats. First and foremost, I am the CEO of Women Venture, which is a it's SBA designated women's business center, and CDFI, which means we give out microloans here in the Twin Cities. Additionally, I am the founder of Black Female Founders, which is a global membership organization for female-led tech startups and female tech leaders throughout the Black diaspora. And also, I'm one of the leaders of the Black Innovation Alliance, which is a national collective of Black tech ecosystem builders. And let me, so the question is what do I love about being Black in tech? What I love about it, to be honest, is that I got into it early when it wasn't considered like a thing, and have continued to be an advocate and activist in this space. And so now more than ever, we're talking about theme of this month, and also this month is April is Black Women's History Month. And so as a Black woman in tech who has been in this space now, and I don't want to date myself, but I'm not new to this, I'm true to this work. I love the fact that I have an opportunity to help create and use my experience and skills, my passion and energy to make pathways for others in this space from the workforce development side and also on the entrepreneurship side.
Awesome. Well said, Erin. Caroline.
Hey everyone, I'm Caroline Karanja. I'm the CEO at Hack the Gap, and we are working on closing the gender gap in tech. And I also run an organization called Guided Pulse, which used to be called 26 Letters, where we're really focused on helping organizations put action and data behind their diversity, equity, and inclusion work. What's the thing that I love about being Black in tech? I love tech. I think that it's a really creative outlet. And in particular, I think for people who have not traditionally been represented in the space, it's an opportunity to not just bring something new to the table, but to focus on the things that we care most about. And so for me, it's just been really exciting to think about how to use technology, how to stand up products, and how to share them out and contribute in different parts of the communities that I care most about.
Awesome. Excited to hear more from you later, Caroline. And Jonathan, quick intro.
Hey, good afternoon to those on the East Coast. Good morning to those of us here in Minnesota. Jonathan Banks, president and co-founder of Next. We are a design and technology company. We help leaders defeat stagnation, drive revenue, and create our best world. The thing I love about being Black and in tech, I guess, is, you gotta love being Black. It's a great, culture. It's a great way to be. I'm glad to be born this way. And, I think it just leads a lot into the work that we do in technology. I think living in a country like the United States, we find that somehow a lot of like the advances, privileges, opportunities, it takes innovation just to get a hold of them. And so like when you're in technology, you're just innovating all day long, and it's kind of by nature, it's kind of something that like I think we just do as a people. So it's really an industry that lends itself to Black folks, I think, and it's definitely lent itself to me.
Awesome. So I didn't lie when I said we have some heavy hitters on the call, but I think one place I want to start, just kind of hearing you all talk about your passion in creating access and opportunity for others. Let's start at the beginning for you. What was your entry point into technology? And also talk a little bit about how entry points into tech have changed and evolved, and more access has come since you first entered. Caroline, maybe we'll start with you, and then go to Erin.
Sure. So I got into tech, I would say purely by accident. I was working on a specific project. I wanted it to have like a tech representation, so I started diving in. I didn't get a chance to actually do the project how I wanted it to, but in the midst of all of that, I really fell in love with the idea of, with a computer and basic internet and a little bit of understanding that I could build something. And so I ended up diving into mostly Stack Overflow to help me figure out different issues that I was having as I was building just sample products here and there. And I really enjoyed it. I really fell in love with it. I could come up with an idea and within 2 or 3 days have a rough outline of what like a digital representation of it could be. And so I think that in that way, my journey into tech was very different, right? It wasn't geared towards my building a career around it. It was very much like I was curious about something and then now started to figure out like, okay, I now have these tools in my tool belt that I can now use to build up different things. And from there, started working with different friends and colleagues to help them, bring a website or an application to the projects that they were working on. I think the biggest difference that I've seen over the course is like, I started off with Stacked Overflow and meetup groups as my main resource, but now we have lots of online coding classes, we have boot camps, and those have definitely formalized the way that people who don't have traditional computer science degrees enter into the tech space. And I think that there are definitely some pros and cons that are built into that are different from the way that I entered and experienced technology. But I think really that's the biggest difference. It's just kind of formalizing that self-development process in a different way and tying like a certification to it. And we can definitely dive into like the impact that that has in terms of making technology more accessible. But that's really the biggest thing I've noted.
So self-taught has a whole new meaning in some ways. People are kind of partnering with you as you're teaching yourself through boot camps and stuff like that, which is different than your experience. Well said. Erin, what about you? What was your entry point and what have you seen in terms of other people accessing the tech ecosystem, whether it be from like a workforce standpoint or entrepreneurship?
That's a great way to intro it, because for me, I kind of came into it in two different ways, and that's a loaded question. So I'm gonna try to like condense it as much as I can to answer. So I kind of came into tech in the late 90s as the .com era was taking off, and I left college at Howard University and got into national advertising in New York. And just by the nature of the time period it was and being like the rookie, I was given all the accounts that nobody wanted to work on, which tended to be at that time .com companies, because everybody were like, these aren't real companies, you go work with them. At the same time, one of the companies that I was trying to do national advertising with ended up being a professor of mine who was a young guy out of DC. And he had started, which sounds at the time sounded crazy and nobody could understand what he was doing, but now it just showed what an innovator he was. He had received VC investing as a startup in Northern Virginia, which really people don't remember was kind of like the original Silicon Valley, right? Because of being by just proximity to government and everything that was being built out. But anyway, he had a company that was doing online shopping comparison at a time where people were just still being just getting email. Okay. And so, but one of the things that he said to me at that time, because part of the reason I was in national advertising, especially in radio, was because my ultimate goal was to be, I wanted to be like the next Kathy Hughes or Oprah or Sheila Johnson. I wanted to own media companies. And so he said, Erin, why don't you just put a radio station online, and start a radio station? And I thought, who is going to listen to that? That's crazy. I could have had Pandora, y'all. I really could have. I could have had, or Spotify or whatever, but I just was not there with him. But he ended up being he was such an innovator. And unfortunately, he passed away at 30, like right after that, we had that conversation, but it always inspired me. And so fast forward, I moved back to the Twin Cities in 2000 and started an organization or e-newsletter called Soul on Ice. And one of the things that we started doing was like having a website and like connecting professionals of color and things like that. But the interesting thing is I was still working with a lot of .com clients, and I would go to these tech events and there were no women there were no minorities there. And it was interesting to me as I look back that I never saw myself as an entrepreneur because I never saw somebody like me on that stage pitching and doing that work. And fast forward, when my career took me to the Bay Area, and I started, and my CTO from Soul on Ice had moved out there, and we were trying to get our tech company started and trying to get into these tech incubators and accelerators, and realizing that there were no women and minorities getting into these programs. And at the same time, professionally, I was trying to get jobs at major tech companies.
I think we may have Erin paused, but Jonathan, maybe we can hear a little bit about your story until technology catches up. Does that work?
Yep, and I think
Okay.
Erin was talking about opportunities at tech companies. So
Yeah.
make sure we pick up on where Erin was at. That was very interesting. First, I guess I got to say, ain't nobody gonna be Black in technology or BIPOC in technology if they're not alive. And I think that, I just have to be very thankful today to the fact that the Floyd family, all the activists, everybody in the system put their resources together and gave us a little bit more assurance that we can actually live to pursue careers in technology. I was fortunate enough to get started real young in my career in technology. I started when I was 4 years old, trying to fix broken telephones that my family were throwing out. That's how I got started. And I just kept working that way. I got kind of putting electricity together, worked into computers, did that all throughout school. I was kind of an early adopter of technology to get my classwork done, keyboarding. I never picked up handwriting. My handwriting's terrible if you see it this day, because I decided in the second grade I was going to do everything on the keyboard. I was like, I don't need handwriting. I'll just write it on the keyboard. So, straight out of high school, got into a laptop program at Washburn High School in South Minneapolis. I wish I could find the technology person who was my mentor there, because she wrote me my first recommendation letter that got me started and got me my first contract at my first company. So that's kind of how I got into this all. And, it's just, I feel very blessed to have been on this path. It seems like the only path I could have ever been on. And yeah, that's how I got started.
And Jonathan, just out of curiosity, how have entry points and pathways into tech or pivoting into tech shifted over the years since you've been in tech for so long?
From what I've seen, there's more, I guess, pathways into technology now. And it's more of a real thing. I think anytime you look at employment, you kind of see a commoditization of these specialized jobs. And at first, there was kind of like a stereotype around who could be a web developer, an admin, even what these jobs were described as. And now those stereotypes have kind of washed away more as the positions have become more accessible and more commoditized. So some of the pathways that I like to access or like to see happening is really some of the programs that y'all run at Minnesota Technology Association. I mean, the SciTech program is phenomenal. The way that you're building leadership there is phenomenal. And those are some very strong pathways for getting into technology. And I know Erin's back, and she's going to tell us all about the pathways that she was building too.
Yes, we're happy to have you back, Erin. Take it away. I think you were talking about entry points into technology companies before we had some technology issues.
This is why I'm in tech, right? Because tech is great until it isn't. So, okay, I'm sorry. Where did you miss off? Because I was like in my zone and I like totally don't know when you all lost me. So what's the last thing you heard? Anybody can jump in. What was I saying?
Talking about entry points into tech companies in the Bay Area. That's the last piece I remember you saying.
Okay, great, perfect. So I was saying that when I moved to the Bay Area in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, I really was trying to get in either from an entrepreneurial perspective, because I saw this is like, okay, wow, this is where real generational wealth is going to happen. So I was trying, my CTO from Soul and Ice had moved out there too to work at a tech startup, and we tried to get into these tech incubators and accelerators, and we were being told no. And we realized, okay, we're two Black, founders, and everybody at that time that was getting into these programs were white men. So young white men were being supported by older white men. There were no women, there were no minorities. But then also on the workforce development side, I was thinking, okay, if I can just get in the ecosystem, so I'll go and I'll try to work on the sales side of these organizations, because I've always been a top salesperson, and I couldn't get in. I was applying to Google, and I'm gonna date myself somewhere, monster.com and whatever, but I was literally being told, hey, you went to an HBCU, we don't rank those colleges the same way, and it's not a good culture fit, right? Which now, there wasn't a Twitter to get on and put somebody on blast at the time. So I had what I call my Legally Blonde moment of getting really frustrated. Like I couldn't break in from a workforce perspective or from an entrepreneurship perspective, and realizing that, because what I did know is that, because this wasn't a term we even used at the time, I knew I needed to get in the ecosystem some sort of way. So I just took a whole different route and got frustrated and moved back to DC, where I went to school, and got into the early days of telecom policy, which eventually went into tech policy. And that's how I got in it, and realized that I couldn't get through these obstacles myself. And I'm a fighter. So I was like, I got to create these pathways for others and focus my work on the participation of women and minorities in the innovation economy.
So I think I want to zoom in on a few things you talked about in terms of like you all, I know you all separately from this panel are doing things within your respective organizations to create pathways. So I want to hear a little bit more about that and share with folks who are trying to break into tech, how to tap into you all as leaders and your respective organizations. So Caroline, maybe I'll go to you first. Talk a little bit about Guided Polls, Hack the Gap. What are things that you and your folks are doing to create pathways into tech?
Yeah, definitely. So I like to think of Guided Pulse and Hack the Gap as two sides of the same coin. So on one side with Hack the Gap, we're really interested and invested in getting more uh, people who identify as women, non-binary folks into technology, right? And so what that means for us is whether it's connecting people to job opportunities, whether it's helping them build their first tech project. And so our hackathons, which we're most known for, people have used those within their portfolios to showcase that they're capable of, building tech, right? And so that was definitely a big conversation about, whether or not specifically, like, do women really know how to build technology? Like I've heard people even, I think like 2 months ago, I heard someone make a comment around it, and it just was very strange, right? And so anyway, so by giving people an opportunity to showcase that they can build stuff and giving them that opportunity to also build community and build relationships and friendships with one another, we're really helping folks foster a network for themselves, right? And so your network is your net worth, and by the end of the day, it's one of the most effective ways to get a job opportunity, right? Most opportunities are through who you know. So that's one side of Hack the Gap. The other thing as well too within Hack the Gap is that personally, I'm really interested and excited about the opportunity to give people a chance to build up something for themselves, right? We know that a lot of workplaces are not really suited for people like all of us on this call to be there and to thrive and feel heard and be able to try new things. And so I'm actually a big proponent of people, having either something on the side, like a side gig, or building their own professional portfolio that stands alongside their job, but is also independent of it, because that's one of the very key assets that you can hold that no company can really take from you, right? And so that's a slightly different conversation, but that's a key part of it, is giving people that opportunity to explore that side. With Guided Pulse, I just mentioned retention. It's about helping organizations figure out how to retain their top talent. It's about helping them understand some of the barriers and the gaps that are there, helping them see that and create action-driven plans towards addressing that. So we do it really under the broader umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think of it really as a way of helping organizations innovate and see diverse talent and diverse perspectives as a key angle into how they can think about their products, their services, and their customers. And so by pairing those two, for us, it's been really exciting because we can see some of the progress, whether it's first working with a company to understand how they can improve their company culture before they go hiring folks who are incredibly talented, but are not necessarily reflected within the team. And then on the other side, providing people an opportunity to engage and see whether or not those companies and organizations are a good fit for them.
And Caroline, you talked about something interesting in terms of like the different experiences of working within a company that's your own versus working for someone else in the tech ecosystem. And we're definitely going to talk about those differences, but would love to turn to both Erin and Jonathan just to ask the question of how do you approach starting your own thing in the tech ecosystem? Like, what does it mean to be a founder in the tech community here in Minnesota? And how can folks who are interested in wanting to do that go about it? Jonathan, maybe I'll start with you, and then Erin, you're on deck to share your perspective on that.
Okay, well, I'll keep it brief because I know Erin's going to have most of the expertise on this one. So I think, the way you start is by, finding the thing that you can do every day, even if you're not paid to do it, because when you start, it's going to be hard to get paid. Especially being black, it's, a lot, more difficult to raise funds. The percentages are super low. It's like 1% of venture capital goes to black folks, or it's another stat that Erin will know more about than I do, but it's super low. So you're going to be bootstrapping this thing. You're going to have to get up and do it. Make sure you've got your family on board, make sure you've got your friends on board, and start putting your resources together right away. Like we talked about, Caroline brought up a good point. Your network is your net worth, right? Not only are these folks going to be helpful in connecting you, but they're going to be helpful in telling you if what you're trying to do makes sense and if it's something that really seems like yourself. You know, we all have these ideas that we want to pursue, these great businesses, and they're probably really great ideas, but sometimes they might only be great for us that month or that year that we thought about it, and it might be really good for someone else the following year, right? And so that's something where your network can really help you zero in on, you know, if this is the right idea for you. And then there's all like the base, like just kind of the basics, right? Do the math. Do the math of, you know, what's the opportunity here? Is the market big enough? What type of revenue are people bringing in who are running a business like this? What are the profit margins? And all those sorts of things. All that type of stuff that you can learn in school. Go through all those processes and make sure that the business makes sense.
And Jonathan, just to come back to you really quickly, do you find that starting something in tech is different than founding anything else? Like, are there any tips or tricks that are specific to the tech ecosystem versus just starting a business on your own, from your experience?
Yeah, so my experience is limited here because I've only
Been in
started
tech, that's
businesses in
true.
tech. So, but I can tell you some of the attributes of starting businesses in tech. I mean, usually you're going to do a product or a service, and the services are good because you can get expertise and be able to sell that expertise. Put it into as you can sell it as a service and earn revenue that way. If you got a product, a lot of these things you can make at home. You can use cloud-based tool sets to create them, and it's very accessible. So that's usually where you're going in the technology realm.
That's helpful context. Thank you for that, Jonathan. And Erin, from your perspective, what is it? I guess what questions should folks be asking themselves? What should they be doing in the first 30 days? What are any tips you have for starting something of your own in tech?
Sure. Well, I think there's a few different things. First, find community, right? Because that's the most helpful thing. It's been brought up by the other panelists about your network, and that's absolutely important. Here in the Twin Cities, there's an awesome meetup group called Tequity for Blacks in Tech here, but don't limit it to just local resources, because that's the extensive community is where you can find a lot of really great things. There's an amazing amount of Facebook groups, honestly, that a lot of people can tap into that have like over thousands of members, and they just share resources with each other. But you know, it's ever changing, because it can be anything from meetup groups to Facebook groups to group me's and Google Meets, but just asking people around you, hey, how do you find out about information? Where does that go? I think one of the things that people don't pose to themselves is, okay, and this is what was posed to me by that founder, when he told me to start a radio station online. He said, if I gave you $1 million today, what would you do? And because I didn't know what to do with it, he was like, that's the whole part of the exercise, right? If somebody gives you this money, you don't even know what to do with it yet. So this is where you lean on organizations like Women Venture, you lean on entrepreneurial organizations that teach you how, because business is business at the end of the day. So there are programs and resources to teach you how to be a business person, right? And understand the aspects of business that you need to know. And you don't need to know every single thing. You have to be the subject matter expert on whatever that product or service is. Jonathan talked about, be the expert, because what investors, or even when if you get a loan, whatever you do to obtain capital, or even winning pitch competitions so that you don't dilute any of your equity in your company, whatever it is. But people are investing in you because they know that it's not the idea, it's, are you the person that should be the one to get it done and build the right team. And the team isn't just your co-founders, and it's not just the people that you hire. One of the early things that you can do is build an amazing advisory board for free, to just say, okay, what strengths do I need to put around me that balance out my strengths, so that, that I have a solid team. So as an example, if you're a technical founder, or even a non-technical founder, but let's say whatever the product or service, that space inside and out, but maybe you're not the best at finances, getting somebody on your advisory board who is really great at finances, or getting somebody who is a subject matter expert, like surround yourself with subject matter experts. So community, subject matter experts, and also social capital. Those kind of are the three major things that I would like lean into first and foremost before you go into anything else.
I love that. And I want to just quickly get like a few sound bites from all three of you of like, what's the number one place you go to find like BIPOC communities specifically in our tech ecosystem? And then we'll pivot in a different direction. But I want to make sure our attendees capture like the different resources and ways to find community specifically, since all three of you have spoken to that. So
So
Erin, really
Jade,
quickly.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Jade, sorry. We do have a question, if you want me to go ahead and ask it now from the audience. There's
Sure,
one
go for
question.
it.
Okay, so this is to everyone. What programs encouraged you to pursue a career in tech? Was it school, after school programs, college, a teacher that encouraged you? I think we kind of was talking a little bit about that, but if you guys can just kind of continue to talk about that and answer those questions. So just basically what programs, schools, person, encouraged you to pursue a career in tech?
And I'll jump in to say it depends on, because what we're talking about are two different aspects of tech, right? We're talking about workforce, like being in the workforce and having technical skills, either technical, or you can also be a non-technical skills, like, because the area of tech still includes sales, it still includes marketing, it includes social media, it's a lot of other things. But then there's also the entrepreneurial route. So first, it depends on what route you're trying to go. But one thing I'll say on the technical side, there are really great programs that exist now that didn't exist when I was younger, that you don't necessarily have to go to school for. In the Twin Cities, a program that I worked with last year that Jade knows very well is Dream Core Tech, which was founded by Prince and Van Jones, that's teaching people who do not have technical skills to get into tech and become new software developers and entry-level software developers. But there's programs like that, which that program doesn't charge you, but there are programs that do charge you or take a percentage of your first year salary and things like that. But that's one specific to the Twin Cities, right? But on the entrepreneurial, so just looking for programs like that that teach you how to be a developer if you want to be a technical founder. There are also programs that allow you to learn how to be a tech salesperson. And I'll come back with that and throw it in the chat. But I think that it's, I think it's FlackJ might be what it's called, but something like that's a sales one that comes to mind. But there are some really cool ones, and some of these have been actually started by BIPOC leaders to create those. But on the entrepreneurial side, there are a number of programs, again, that teach you how to be an entrepreneur in tech. And there's so many of them. There's on a national level, there's Black Women Talk Tech and Black Men Talk Tech, which are the same organization. And that's for their goal is really to create the next, billion-dollar or the first billion-dollar Black-led tech company. And there's other ecosystems. So I won't dominate the time, but just know first what lane you're going to be in, and know that you don't necessarily have to go to college for it. But if you are in college, and while you're in college, it's a great opportunity to take advantage of resources. So many campuses now across the country are creating entrepreneurial programs specific even to tech to help encourage that, because that no matter what industry you're in, tech is touching it at this point.
Well said, Erin. Well said. Anything to add related to that question before we pivot? I guess the only thing I would add to, since Erin talked about Dream Core, is in Minnesota specifically, in the Twin Cities, MSP Tech Hire is an awesome program that's joint funded by the city of St. Paul and the city of Minneapolis to get folks into boot camps as well. So if funding is an issue, MSP Tech Hire is something I recommend. Also through CompTIA, there's Creating IT Futures, which gets you into technology. It's not as a software engineer, but it's in more like service desk roles and different technicians within technology. So there's definitely lots of programs from that perspective. Caroline, Jonathan, anything to add program-wise? Jonathan has already mentioned SciTech too, but.
Yeah, I think the like other local boot camps, I mean, you have Prime Academy, there's University of Minnesota has their own program. So there are a couple of different options there. Those are like you have to pay to be part of the program, but I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are actually a lot of really great online courses and programs that you can try. So that's everything from like 1 month is a program. I think it's like, I don't remember exactly what the pricing is, but it's all like online learning. Team Treehouse actually is one that I really like, and they go beyond technology. They have like business courses. You can also get certified on it. And I would also definitely keep track of some of the certification programs that are coming out of Coursera and from Google. It's like Google Work. If you just look up Google certification that would pop up as well. So if you're the kind of person who either you already have other work and you can't necessarily take time off to participate in a full-time program, looking at some of those online resources to maybe kickstart your way into learning how to code. And that would go either path, I think, to Erin's point about entrepreneurship versus like a true tech skill or into the workforce version of it. So yeah.
Well said.
And I will just jump in and say that a couple other ones, the online resources are really great, like Udemy, and there's a number, like you can Google them all the time, but local programs that I know are sponsored by some local corporations, as well as Hackbright, which is for women going into tech. Also, if you're in high school, Genesis Works is a really great program. So there's a lot, just depending on what you want to do and where you want to do it.
Definitely, definitely. So we've sort of dabbled at entrepreneur or workforce side, like both being entry points into tech, but we haven't directly talked about, like, from your experiences, sort of pros and cons of both. And if you all can kind of codify, like, what has your experience been on the workforce side versus entrepreneurship, and what thoughts should people have as they kind of decide which path they want to take, or as they explore both? Jonathan, from your perspective, I know you've done both. What are the differences and what should people consider as they try and think about both paths?
That's a great question. Um, I guess I'd start by saying the similarities before I get to the differences, if that's all right, and I'll try to get through it quickly enough. I think the similarities is that you got to know your stuff, and you got to be curious, ready to learn, explore things on your own, take advantage of all the resources that we just talked about, and the ones that specifically apply to you, your age range, where you're at in your career. Get started early if possible, right? So you can develop that skill set and have it be kind of a second nature, even first nature, if possible. I think one of the things that's shared is that you're going to face structural racism and systemic racism, both being an entrepreneur and in an organization. One of the things that you'll run into in most organizations is, they're very white-centered policies, procedures, language, culture, all of those things. So if you're from an immigrant community or any non-white type of community, then that's going to be a lot of, navigating that, and it's difficult. One way to get over it is to find mentors in the business who understand you and that will, help you navigate those things. And I think the same thing we've talked on the entrepreneurship side, it's all about networking, right? And, you got to build bridges across the economy, right? I mean, it's great to be successful within, a non-white tech ecosystem, but, our economy is bigger than that. So you've got to find the ways to build bridges and interact with others who are in that ecosystem. An example might be, finding some strategic partnerships for your company, when you're doing providing services that the company just doesn't have the ability to offer themselves, and getting into a network that's outside of yours that way. And there's plenty of other ways to go about it. But I think the challenges are pretty similar when it comes from that standpoint. And I just want to make sure that, like, Carolyn and Aaron can answer the question. So maybe I'll let them get to maybe some more of the differences.
Yeah, that's great. Caroline, thoughts on differences? Because I know you've done both as well, on the technology side.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference is that when you're working for a company, your work goes to that company, right? And so I think the pros are a set salary, hopefully benefits. You can hopefully leave your work at 5 p.m. or whenever you're done, or after you launch the product. And I think all of that is, like, definitely something to keep in consideration. As I mentioned earlier, I think even if you are in the workforce, you should always think about the part of your professional life that is also yours. I think people really underestimate, and they tie all of the things that they do into the specific company that they work at, right? And so I think if you can figure out, like, what is your personal professional brand outside of that company, it also means that you are more valuable to that company, and it also makes it easier should you ever need to go to a different company, right? Again, because we know that different workplaces will work for different people in different ways. The one thing that I have personally really come to love about being an entrepreneur is being able to try new things. Sometimes those things work, sometimes those things don't. The same pros that applied to the, being in the workforce is exactly what happens if you work for yourself, right? So you have to figure out how to get people to understand the value that you're bringing to the table. There's all of the money side of things, right? That definitely lead me. I'm very tempted to go into a conversation about why, healthcare should not be tied to a job, but that's a whole different story. I think that, really there are some key things that make that path difficult beyond just a skill set and a talent. But what I've really loved is just the opportunity to decide who I work with, the types of projects that I work with. And that's not the same if you're in a workforce. But then that's also why if you're going to enter a workforce, really doing as much research as possible into the company you're going to be at, talk to some of the people that are there, talk to the people who identify in similar ways as you do and see what their experience is. People who don't understand, what their experience is as well. I think it's important to treat the interview process as a two-way street, right? And trying to figure out the best way to do that. That way you can find a place that's really going to be a good fit. Because even with what I said before, there are some places where people really do work as hard as, entrepreneurs do. And in that, I mean, that sometimes you're up all night because you're trying to get some work done for a client or something else, right? And so really understanding all the different facets that are that come into being in the workforce in different company settings. And I think that there's no wrong path, right? There's only the path that's right for you in that moment. And so I definitely am excited about the amount of energy that I'm seeing as people are going into the workforce and the things that they're asking their organizations to be a part of and engage with. And that is only better, I think, for our communities. And I'm also very excited about the entrepreneurial efforts that I'm seeing across the board, from people who are, as young as middle school and high school, all the way to folks who are really entering the second stage of their lives and saying, I want to do something a little bit different, use the skill set that I have. And so it's just really about figuring out the best path for you. But again, a big part of it is just doing as much background research and talking to as many people who have had that experience as possible. So that way, you know exactly what it is that you're getting into.
And I think what Caroline and Jonathan have both said to me is there's a place for you in either direction. There's a place for us in the tech ecosystem, whether it be on the workforce, working for a company side, or as an entrepreneur. We have a place at the table, and there's programs and pathways to tap either one. It's all about which one you want to pursue. Erin, just quick question for you. I know we've talked a lot about the entrepreneurship side from the founder perspective, but I'm curious for folks who want to work in the startup space and not on the corporate company side, what are pathways and entry points into working amongst entrepreneurs and being in that entrepreneur ecosystem without founding your own company? Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm sure there's folks out there that want to be in the mix, but don't necessarily feel ready to start their own company.
Absolutely. So one thing that I'll say, Jonathan made a great point earlier about, start as early as you can. And that's absolutely true. But I do think to the point that you're making, Jade, is that it's never too late to jump in either, though, right? Because again, all of the skills that you have, that you bring, there's some aspect of it that can fit in. And it doesn't matter. I mean, it's so interesting, like how many companies that I see that they need some sort of skill set that transfers either as a subject matter expert because you're working with a med tech company. And so maybe you have some clinical background or whatever, or maybe even you worked as a personal care assistant, right? A PCA. And then this is actually an app that's for PCAs. And so they need people that have that background. It doesn't matter what you're like, no matter what you do, you're an expert at something, right? And so there's a company that has and needs that expertise. But additionally, like I said, there's still businesses at the end of the day. So all of these companies still need the administrative side of things done, the financial side, the marketing, all of those components too. So again, getting into the ecosystem just by networking, attending events, hearing, I'm just a big fan of, and I and people who know me know I'm always referencing like kids movies because I think there's some great stuff in them. But anyway, so one in particular is robots, right? And robots has this whole line in there about see a need, fill a need. And it's totally like how tech works. And like people barter all the time for your subject matter expertise. And so I've had an opportunity to work. I always tell people I am not, it's funny how many people say, Erin, like, here's a technical problem, help me solve this. I'm like, I am not a technical person at all. But let me tell you, I can run a tech business. I can help you with your marketing. I can help you with all these other aspects of it. I can help you build community, because those things at the end of the day are still really big components of it. So I think what all of you've heard from all of the panelists is become a subject matter expert on one thing, whatever that one thing is. Then use your personal branding to market you as a subject matter expert on said thing, and then connect with the type of companies and businesses that align with it, with you on it. And whether that is a startup, whether that is because there's so many, one other things that I want to mention is part of what my path to success has been is not actually been as an entrepreneur starting my own business. I took those skills and became an intrapreneur. An intrapreneur is taking entrepreneurial skill sets and then taking it inside a corporate or public sector environment and like connecting those dots and being an innovator. And innovation doesn't always mean tech. It just means finding new ways to solve really important problems. And people, to me, who have especially Black folks and BIPOC folks, right, who have been through a lot of trauma, who are survivors, that's where real innovation comes into play. Because when you've been able to do so much more with so much less than everybody else, you know how to make that happen, and you can translate that into a business setting.
Well said. And I also just really love the call out and shout out that you made to the spaces for non-technical people in tech. I never saw myself in tech 5 years ago, but building programming, relationship building, connecting people, being a connector, like those are all really, really important pieces of tech that we need more people doing that. So it's so true. You're a subject matter expert in something, and there's a space for it in tech. Well said. So we are coming up on time. I knew this would happen quickly with really smart, brilliant folks on a call. So I do want to wrap up with you all sharing just quick snippets of where can people go tomorrow or as soon as this call wraps today to find community and start getting plugged into community in the tech ecosystem, because that's something that's been a continued theme throughout every question we've talked about. So what are the go-to places to find community in the tech ecosystem? Jonathan, I'll start with you. What are some things that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm just gonna give one because he didn't make it here with us today, but I'd hit up Black Tech Talent, Mike J over there, and that's a great place to start.
It's a good one. Well said. Caroline, thoughts on finding community quickly in the tech ecosystem?
Yep, definitely. So you mentioned MSP Tech, Hack the Gap. I think that definitely just taking a look at meetup.com and seeing what meetups are around is also a good place to find some new ones.
And Erin, last but not least, ways to find community in our tech ecosystem.
So I build on the things that I've already said. You know, there are so many places and spaces to find community online. So but it starts even with articles, right? So do some reading. There are The Plug, which is a national news source for Blacks in tech, and it shares a lot of resources about companies and things that are happening in organizations. But just all you have to, Google is your friend, right? So if you just Google, hey, Blacks in tech in Minnesota, Blacks in tech in the Twin Cities, I mean, so much stuff will come up, right? And so I think that's the very first place that I would go, is like find the community, and then, and do those same searches on Facebook, do those same searches on, on Twitter and on Instagram and others, LinkedIn, right? Where there are these groups and these communities. People are carrying community on Slack and WhatsApp and like whatever. And there's so many different places. But the other thing is if you find somebody, ask them where they are, how are they getting connected to the community, and just make that your question. But I think that I just also want to go back to something that Jonathan said earlier about mentors. Mentors are so critical. So it's okay. And mentors don't have to just be older than you. They can be younger than you. So ask around, ask people to mentor you in this space and place and where you want to end up and what you want to do.
One other thing I'll shout out before time runs out is Blacks in Technology. Is another organization that is here in the Twin Cities doing programming and stuff like that for folks who want to be in the tech ecosystem. I also want to just say I totally love and appreciate sort of sacred spaces for BIPOC folks in technology, and would love to see more BIPOC folks in non-BIPOC specific tech ecosystem spaces. So for example, Minnesota Technology Association, we run a ton of technology programming, and I would love to see y'all at our Tech Careers 1.0 events, which are designed for people who are 0 to 7 years into their tech career, 0 being a key part of who we service for folks who want to pivot. So we can be in those spaces too. We don't only have to just show up in the BIPOC specific design technology ecosystem spaces. So definitely use us as resources too. We are a resource now that we just shared our experiences here. And I think we're at time. Adeshewa, do you want to wrap up with anything? But it's been a pleasure talking
Yes,
with you
I
all
do.
today.
First, I want to say to Jonathan, Caroline, Aaron, my God, thank you so much. This has been great. And of course, as Jade mentioned, never enough time. I mean, we could go on for hours. I know you guys are busy, but I would love to go on for hours. I know that's not the case. So thank you very much for taking time out of your schedules to be a part of this discussion. Jade, thank you as well. When they say Black Girl Magic, they come to you, they are so true. This has been great. Thank you, Anissa, for the words in the beginning. Thank you, Eric, who is working behind the scenes. I mean, this is just great. This is exactly what I wanted this to turn out, to start to continue that discussion for our audience, for people that are watching now, that are going to be watching after, just having those resources and places to go. For those that are interested in tech, there's a lot from the BIPOC community that are interested and they just don't know where to start. And hopefully the information that was shared on this in this discussion today helps them. And that they also do reach out to your organizations, to Minnesota Technology Associations, to some of these other resources to help and, start if they want to become, that tech professional, or if they want to eventually get into entrepreneurship. So once again, thank you very much on behalf of myself, Dee. Definitely will be doing this again. We will not be waiting until April. Jay, that's just a note for you. We're going to need to connect because I definitely want to do this again soon.
Awesome. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, you guys. Have a good day.